Welcome to the PopCult Podcast. Here are your hosts, Ariana and Seth.
This is the PopCult Podcast. I'm Seth.
I'm Ariana.
And today we're going to be reviewing two very different love stories, I guess we could call them. A little later, we're going to be reviewing Rye Lane, which I believe was a pretty big hit at this year's Sundance Film Festival. But before we get to that, we're going to be looking at Sanctuary, which is the feature film debut of writer-director Zachary Wiggin. In the wake of inheriting his father's hotel chain, Hal tries to end his long and secret relationship with Rebecca, a dominatrix. A battle of wills ensues over the course of one fraught night, with Rebecca and Hal struggling to keep the upper hand. This is a two-hander film, so we have Christopher Abbott as Hal, and we have Margaret Qualley as Rebecca. And I think there's some voices on the phone and some people briefly glimpsed, but it is a movie in which those two are carrying the weight of it. Ariana, what did you think of Sanctuary?
I really enjoyed this film. It showed both actors their chopping skills.
So this was a Food Network production?
Yep,
they're acting chops.
Yeah, it really did show to me because I was on the fence about Margaret Qualley for a while until now. Until I saw this. And how I think I just had this thing that I'm very I don't know how to feel about Nepo babies all the time.
Well, for listeners who might not know, Margaret Qualley is the daughter of Andy McDowell, who a lot of people would know from Groundhog Day.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's not as if her mom was this A-list actress.
And Andy McDowell always felt very kind of down to earth.
Yes. And I think whoever has been coaching her through her career, meaning Margaret Qualley, has done very well because she hasn't had her teeth capped, so she looks
like a normal person.
Yes, a lot of times. And then
when she has a slight gap, which I think maybe her mother has.
Yes.
And it's one of those things that, especially in contemporary Hollywood, if you start to pay attention to famous actors' teeth, you're going to start to notice how artificial everyone's teeth look.
Squared off.
Yeah, it's all blindingly white.
Yes.
Every tooth is even capped and everything, and it's so unnatural looking. But yeah, thankfully her teeth appear to be her normal teeth.
Yes. And I remember watching the trailers, not really knowing how I would feel about it. I really enjoyed it, but it also reminds me of the film in a different way, Secretary.
Yeah.
Where it's talking about sexuality and it's talking about these people's preferences
and power positions
and how, in a weird sense, this is what makes them happy.
This is kind of the reverse Secretary.
Yes, where she's the one who has the upper power versus him.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts?
I don't think I liked it as much as you liked it. But it was a movie that as I was watching it, I'm going, oh, she's going to love this fucking movie. I can tell. I need to know you so well. I think for me, I enjoy films that I like to consider well-rounded, in that all aspects of filmmaking are just the best, right? So that's technical, that's performance, all kinds of things. And I would say the acting in this movie is a 10.
Yes.
You're not going to find probably too many better acted movies this year than this one, which it has to be, because so much of the film depends on these two actors in a space that is confined and doesn't change. So we really need them to be very engaging in their performances to keep our attention for this long. There's no other spectacle to rely on as a distraction. There are some attempts at some interesting cinematography, kind of playful camera angles. I recall there's a scene where he's searching for a camera that she's told him she's hidden in the room. And when he, leans to one side to look under the table, the camera leans with him, the opposite side. So it wasn't anything mind blowing, but it was somebody definitely trying.
Yeah, the problem was a lot of the things that they were trying suddenly dissolved, so it becomes something in the back of your mind to make a note of if you're going to review the movie or tell someone that you enjoyed it, because it becomes like a faded thing. It becomes a problem. It's if you're gonna be that clever, continue to be that clever for the rest of the film, or just don't do it at all kind of thing. It did feel, and we remarked on this when we were watching, it felt like something that could have been a play.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a movie that easily could have been produced as a stage play. And I hadn't seen anything that hinted that it originated that way. But I would not be surprised if this was like an off-Broadway thing. And then the director added some like cinematic elements to it. Now let's kind of talk about it's a movie that certainly has like a momentum.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a number of power shifts as the narrative goes on. What did you think? We'll just talk specifically about actors. What did you think in specific about Margaret Qualley's performance?
I do. So there's a scene where she goes down the hall into the elevator and she's waiting for the elevator to close. And when she peers out, she doesn't see him walking out, but she hears him. So she holds her hand out to make the elevator open up until he comes back, not knowing that she'd stalled the elevator. It was small things that were like indicating to me that like this was a little bit beyond just what surface level what I'm watching. And those tiny little gestures just allowed me to be like, oh, she's full body into the commitment of this role. Like she's doing these things that are like necessary for you to go back and think about the film of being like tiny like movements or even gestures, or the way that like she would take like a deep breath before she's like, okay, I'm going to try to take over dominance one more time.
Well, going back to the beginning of the movie, when she's introduced, the audience is in a position of, we have less knowledge than the two of them.
Yes.
Because she's introduced and we kind of have to piece it together. And it appears that she's interviewing him for the position of CEO at the hotel chain in the hotel that they're staying.
Yeah.
And we start to realize that something else is going on because her questions become more personal, where she starts asking him about how old he was when he lost his virginity. And then it becomes this form of like sexual degradation. And then there's a point where it breaks and it's revealed that there's a script that he's written and gave to her, and she needs to stick to that script because she goes off of it a little bit. And so that introduces kind of an interesting element of who is in charge of the encounter.
Yeah.
And that does get addressed later in the movie, but I think that was interesting in that he writes himself in a position of powerlessness, but the minute she starts to become playful with his material, he asserts his power briefly to get her to come back to where she should be in the script and then relinquishes it. And so it, begs this question of who is in power in this dynamic?
Yeah.
Because even that first scene disorients us so that even when we are given extra knowledge, we really don't know if she is dominating him or if this is just a transactional thing and her domination of him is just a service being rendered.
Yeah. And in ways, it kind of reminds me when they're trying to have like genuine conversations. The scenes that I can connect it to past media that we watch reminds me of Succession when it comes to Shiv and Tom, when they would be like, are we done with the bullshit? Are we going to talk really about what's going on?
There's layers of conversation.
There's always a play in the back of it, just being like, boom, I'm being genuine. And then the next scene is them going back into what the roles that they know, only for the other person to go like, hold up, did you really mean what you said before? And it's the blurring of the lines that keep them wanting to stay in that game. And you start to question when you're watching it is like, when is the fantasy going to wash away? When are we going to see them genuinely where they are? And there's mistrust, but the mistrust is done in almost a playful manner, that it's something that only the two of them can understand.
Well, you're not sure if it's part of the game or if it's authentic.
So you're basically just watching them, wanting to know when is like the authentic / true self is going to reveal itself.
Well, you brought up Succession, and I think in comparing that, the thing in Succession, I immediately thought of when Shiv tells Tom that she's pregnant, and the moment she chooses to tell him, it's not in a genuine, I want to tell the father of my child that he's going to be a dad moment, but it is a power play. And Tom's response in that moment is like, what is this? He doesn't even accept it as true. He thinks it is a power play by Shiv because he's become so conditioned to the falsity of their relationship, that this is not a real thing. In this movie, he believes almost everything she says, in especially things that I, as an audience member, was doubting were true. When she comes back in the room, once she's realized, he's set to inherit a lot of money, and she believes that her humiliation of him is what enabled him to find the confidence within himself to succeed in this field. And she believes she's owed a percentage of that. And so then when she tells him, oh, I've hidden a camera in the hotel room, I didn't believe her. And it was because the way she delivered the line felt like someone who was scrambling for something. And that's something that the audience is left in suspension about for almost the whole movie is, does she have a camera in the room?
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I think we're supposed to not believe her.
I think that is supposed to be. We're not supposed to believe her until everything starts like unraveling itself and her true self starts to, like, you get a glimpse of it and you start to understand, like, she's done fucking around, but she's trying to explain to him how important this is. But since they've never really like been completely honest with each other, he doesn't know what he wants to believe. At the end, it's like, what does he want to believe?
Well, and then there's that interesting twist where she begins to reveal things that she hasn't told him about. And we also have to wonder, is that true or not? She claims that she quit being a professional dominatrix months ago and broke up with her fiance, and that the only thing in her life that makes her feel complete are these sessions with him. But then I think we're also supposed to question, because it comes at a moment where desperation is very clear. So is she scrambling once again to say something that she thinks is going to elicit the response she wants?
Well, that's the moment that she looks so clear-eyed. And also there was a call that she had while she's about trying to leave, where Alexander, that turns out to be her fiance, is calling her, and she's like, I don't understand what you're saying because you're crying. Because she's like basically just answering the phone at a common courtesy kind of thing. But it's obviously like the crying means she did break up with this person. And he is like fumbling when all of this is revealed to him, that he doesn't know what to do with it, because he's like, is she lying? Is she not lying? And she's just sort of like, you can take it or leave it, but this is what it is.
But then I think what's interesting is the title comes from the safe word that they use, which is sanctuary. And the moment when he starts using it, when he feels overwhelmed around halfway, maybe 2/3 of the way through the movie, she ignores the safe word.
Yeah.
Which I feel like is a very important thing to point out, because then I started to question the reality of, is that the safe word, or is that the safe word within the game they're playing? And that there's actually a real safe word outside of the reality of this game. Because even by the time you get to the end of the movie, you're not sure if what we've seen unfolding is a real interaction between two authentic people, or a hyper complex performance of power positions and sex in order to just like derive pleasure, right? Because where the movie ends, it is kind of ambiguous, I think. And because some of the things that he starts to promise are so ludicrous that I can't imagine that he would be able to do those things. Well, I think, but he seems very genuine in his like expression of them.
The way that she is too. I think this film can also correlate. It might do well with like Black Bear, the Aubrey Plaza movie that we saw. I think, which oddly enough,
Christopher Abbott,
he's also in there. So if you want to do a
another sort of pathetic male figure,
But I think it's the power play of sorts. You can relate it between director and actress of the way that he would stop her to be like, that is not what's written. You have to follow the script. And then afterwards, he's kind of like applauding her for her performance and how he was inspired by one of their first sessions, a few things that she had said, using it in the fiction that they're creating together. So
it seems like it could be more than just a movie about like relationships romantically, but like creative, creative relationships,
creative and muse. And it's like the question of like, well, if you made a film starring someone who you used a lot of information from to get the best performance out of them, and then you're offered maybe like a Marvel movie, for example, but you're gonna leave your lead performer behind, the one that like made you make the best film, of course they would be pissed off. Like, you used pieces of her life for your own pleasure at the end of the day. And so like her talking about how she felt a loyalty towards him, but she didn't know how to explain it, that could be conveyed as actors not taking in roles for someone else because so and so told me they're going to start filming in X day and I need to be there for them if they need me. So it can melt into so many different things.
Well, I also want to point out that there is a scene in this movie of sexual assault, that she rapes him at knife point at one point in the movie.
Yeah.
And starts going on this kind of tangent about how he's going to get her pregnant and then she will have his son and that this will fulfill him. And in turn, like, we understand that means she will benefit financially from that.
Yeah.
But that's another thing where, like, and then afterwards she tries to diffuse that and say, oh, she was just talking, that I think she said she's on birth control, that
she has fibro, like,
is it endometriosis?
Yeah,
I think. And that
she can't get pregnant.
it's very difficult for her to get pregnant. And that was a weird scene because I wondered, is this also part of the game, or did she actually sexually assault him?
I think it's also very hard. I think because of the relationship that they have, which is supposed to be this sexual relationship where we don't know the rules, only they two know the rules.
When he doesn't use the safe word during that moment.
He doesn't use the safe word during it, but he asks her like, hey, was that true? Because it's almost like Christopher Abbott does so well with looking a mix between hopeful and heartbroken.
Yeah,
like
he's able to play like the pathetic guy whose life is falling apart very well.
Asking her like, do you want that? I'll give that to you. And she's kind of like, it was just words, don't worry about it. Like, not wanting to tie him through it. So it's hard to be like, is it sexual assault when he doesn't use the safe word and doesn't stop her? And it's clear that they have this very complex relationship with one another. Like, it's hard to say because at the end, they're okay with each other. But it's unfortunately, like, I know that for some people, this would be a hard watch if you are uncomfortable with those certain things. But it's like, that's their kink and they're doing it between two consenting adults. So,
well, and it's also that we're watching, it's a performance and none of this is real.
Yeah.
And so there's all these layers of performance going on that sort of blunt the reality of the acts.
Mm-hmm.
How did you feel about, without giving away anything to the audience who has not seen the movie, what did you think of the note that the film ends on?
I thought it was kind of cute. Like, it's one that, like, if you enjoyed The Secretary, if you're a person,
It's just Secretary, not
Secretary. The Secretary. Okay. I renamed it.
I'm sure there is a movie called The Secretary out there. Yeah.
Like, if you enjoyed Secretary, if you enjoy kind of like thriller sexual stuff, like, it's just going to be almost like lighthearted in comparison to other stuff.
Yeah, it's a very comedic movie.
Yeah.
And no one's life is ever really in peril.
No one's ever in danger. Like, they kind of make it clear between the two of them that they're not cheating on anybody. Like, she gets kind of like aggressive at some point, thinking he might have someone else. And she's kind of like, maybe you need to tell them who you are. And he's like, no, there's just you kind of vibe they're trying to give off. So they're trying to make it very clear as to who they are. But it's that interesting thing of like, she isn't happy outside of these sessions without
Or she
him.
claims.
Like,
we never see them outside of the session, so we never know for sure.
But it is, so it's one, again, we don't know what the rules and we don't know who they are outside of this.
Well, I think that we know the rules, but it's just the film is constructed in a way that it obscures life outside of the hotel.
Yeah.
So her leaving and going to the elevator, you have to question, is that part of the script though? Because we don't get a full copy of the script to peruse to see what's in it. And so have they done this before? And this is just like therapeutic for him, but without any sort of long lasting effects?
I mean, it could be a weird way of getting the energy out. They're like, because he owns these hotels, he's able to make havoc within that room,
without any consequence.
Without any consequences, maybe paying minimal effects to what he has to do. And the moments that you think that their masks are off, both of them feel like sweet and vulnerable and like unable to hurt anybody.
But then she'll say or do something that, and you're like, wait a minute, now is this real? Or are we back in the game again? And
the thing is, like, he also does lie to her a few times. Like, he does, like, he's trying to, like, he isn't clear with her until his back is pressed against the wall.
Well, she kind of strips everything away from him over the course of the movie until he has to talk about the whole reason he's even doing this in the first place. So would you recommend Sanctuary as a film that the audience should check out?
Yeah. I think it's a fun film at the end of the day. If you are,
it's a fun film about dominatrix
and sex and weird kinks. Everybody should watch it with their kids.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those movies that if you want to see two actors really delivering great performances and bouncing off of each other and acting and reacting with each other in a way that just flows very naturally, and every scene makes sense based on what they did and said in the previous scene. I think this is a great one of those movies. There's not a lot to distract the eye.
No.
But it doesn't look bad though.
No, you're not like overwhelmed by too many things at once. Again, you have two main protagonists mostly in one space.
And it's only around 90 minutes long, so it's like that perfect length where you're going to get a full 3-act story. You're going to have a full understanding of who these characters are. There's a very clear arc for both characters.
Yeah.
And yeah, it makes me excited to see. Christopher Abbott's an actor I already know is like pretty good. I'm still waiting for that movie for him. The thing that like, okay, that's the movie that makes Christopher Abbott a name.
Yeah.
And then Margaret Qualley, I think I was in the same boat as you. I first saw her on The Leftovers, where I think her role was a little underwritten.
Yeah.
That character didn't have a whole lot to do.
No, she just kind of disappeared in the background. The adults were more interesting.
And I know she's done other things over the years, and I just haven't really kept up with it. But it's between this and then The Drive-By Dolls, which is Ethan Coen and Trisha Cook's upcoming film. I think this is going to be a pretty interesting year for her. And I'm hoping with that movie, we really start to see her getting more roles and doing some new things and maybe surprising us in new ways. Rye Lane is a film about two youngsters reeling from bad breakups who connect over a particularly eventful day in South London. It is the feature film debut, I believe, of Rain Allen Miller. As soon as I said that, it made me want to check to make sure. And I bet you it won't be. I don't know. It's the first film of note from this director that I've ever been aware of, and it got a lot of interest and buzz at Sundance. She cites Roy Andersson, the Swedish filmmaker who directed movies like Pigeon Sitting on a Branch Reflecting Its Own Existence, as well as Steve McQueen as two of her big influences. What did you think of Rye Lane, Ariana?
I thought it was a delightful film. First of all, we need to take a pause and maybe congratulate my husband of allowing me to watch two kind of romantic films during the weekend. I know you're going to make things terrible within the next few days.
Why would you say that?
You said like apparently the next cinema viewing is about anger or some shit.
Oh, I mean, our next series on PopCult.blog. Make sure to visit us at PopCult.blog. Coming up after we are done with our Mission Impossible series, we'll be doing a series I like to call Angry Cinema.
Okay, cool.
So they're like comedies and things, but they're angry about something.
Yeah. But you know,
those can be delightful too.
Like, we don't watch romantic comedies because
they're terrible.
A lot of them are not great. Some of them are okay.
They're like the worst escapist cinema. Because like I can watch, I told you this yesterday when we were done watching Rye Lane. I said, when I'm watching Mission Impossible, I accept this as the reality because I've never been in situations that Ethan Hunt has been in.
Yeah.
I've never been in pursuit of an arms dealer who has some MacGuffin that could like wipe out half the planet. So I'm like, yeah, I guess this is what it's like. I don't know. It would seem stressful. With Rye Lane, it's like, well, no, I am in a relationship and I have flirted with people. I think being autistic, I think I flirted. Oftentimes I didn't know they were flirting with me. And that I've been romantically linked and had breakups and all these things, right? So this is something for which I have a perspective on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's probably my autism. Having watched Sleepless in Seattle, watching this.
Sleepless in Seattle is bad. Let's just underline that.
Okay.
Like, it is not good.
Can I finish my point, Rayma?
No, let me mansplain it for you.
So I find the way that how a relationship develops and the way it's portrayed in a lot of cinema is so inauthentic and fake to me.
Yeah.
That it's hard for me to let go of that. I get stuck on the fact that no, I've never seen, nor have I experienced myself, anyone talk to each other like this ever. It's so weird.
Yeah.
And I get that it's heightened. And this movie clearly is heightened. And that's one of the things I really liked about it was the visual sensibility.
Yes, it is beautiful.
This is a movie where the director didn't just want to make a romantic comedy. She wanted to make a visually enjoyable movie.
Yeah, and linking it to the Steve McQueen thing, there was a moment that I think people are coming out of the cinema and someone says, Steve McQueen is a genius. And I love that shit. It's like she probably like inserted that for herself.
And like his Small Axe movies, I think share some DNA with this movie.
Yes.
Because those were about it was people from like the West Indies or Caribbean and Jamaican and kind of that culture, but that culture existing in a very white London space.
Well, it's that whole conflict of it being like you had, for example, they were focusing on a Jamaican family and how in a fucked up way, when you live in Jamaica, you're all praising the queen, hoping she never dies, and then being told that, well, this is the motherland, aka England, and when you go there, you're just not accepted.
Yeah,
like fuck you for being here. This film did make a nod towards like Black American culture when it came like the music, like you're talking about Salt and Pepper. They end up seeing Shoot. We're talking about like the album that she goes to go get. It's like
a Tribe Called Quest,
which is like an African American band, and it fully acknowledges everything that it's influenced while trying to be something uniquely itself. So,
well, it is a very British movie.
Yes, even the pacing of it, like the way that the comedy goes, it felt very British. The
sensibility of the humor is very, if you like British comedy, I think people would probably really love this.
Yes.
I go back and forth on British comedy, and I usually always end up liking the weirder, darker stuff.
Yeah.
But if you like things like Peep Show, I know that was an influence on the director. She said she's even stolen shots from Peep Show just because she liked them.
Yeah, there's like this fish eye lens.
She calls them peep shots.
I like that. I think that's very cute.
And cute.
Cute.
I feel like that's something I've never said about a movie in my life. Was like, oh, that was a cute movie.
It's adorable. Just want to go find its little nose.
So we have these. The film completely relies on the two main actors here, David Janssen, who plays Dom, and Vivian Opara, who plays Yaz, or Yaz. That's what it's short for Yasmin. What did you think of the performances of the leads?
I think the performance from Yaz is a little bit more stronger than Dom for me. I thought they were still great. They had very good chemistry with one another. They were a believable cast. I do have to remark, because of the way this shot, their skin looks fucking amazing in these shots.
Yeah, I know Barry Jenkins had commented that like all of film technology that had been developed up to the last few years was not well suited to film black skin,
especially dark skin.
And so it would either like oversaturate it, wash it out, like it just wouldn't be right.
Yeah. Like they looked beautiful.
Yeah, I would say the lighting is perfect.
Yes, and I did enjoy the little scenes that they would make when they were like recollecting memories or like telling each other stories, and how like they were the audience, like either shouting or making remarks or asking questions between the stories.
Has that technique been used in something else? Because it felt very familiar to me, like the characters in the present show up within the flashback and are interacting with elements of the flashback.
That is a very British kind of shot.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen it maybe in a British show or movie or something.
Yeah, and if anyone who's listening to this knows, please remark, because it's like now embedded in my brain trying to remember. But they did it so well, especially within the conversational pieces where, like, for example, Yas is talking about her breakup with her boyfriend, and Dom is supposed to be sitting in the audience asking questions. And I liked how she would turn around. She's like, hold up, I'm not done yet. Like she was like, your anger's gonna build up, and like he'd be like, okay, cool, let me just listen to the rest.
They made it look like a television production.
Yes,
because then they've digitally cut and pasted Dom many times over, so he's every member of the audience,
yes.
studio audience, and like laughing and applauding and booing at certain moments.
And I thought it was kind of funny the way they did start, which it's supposed to be Yas is in the bathroom and she hears Dom's crying. Which like
that opening shot, the overhead toilet shot.
Yes.
Where it's it's like just a massive, I guess, public building with toilets in it.
Yeah.
And the camera's doing an overhead tracking shot, so you see different people using the bathrooms for different reasons. Like some people are going to the bathroom. There's somebody like passed out, like as if they were throwing up. I think there's someone like doing drugs in the toilet or something like that. Yeah. I thought that was a really interesting way to begin the movie. And I can also see that Roy Anderson influence in there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that this is something that it's a constructed set, but within this constructed set, we've created a living, breathing world.
Yes.
So it's no matter which direction you would look, you'd find something interesting. Like there's a story in all these stalls, but we're just going to focus on the story in this one particular stall.
Yes. And then there's a lot about this film to enjoy, between the coloring, between the story set up. It feels like the type of movie that we would have seen more like in the 1980s, 1990s, early 2000s, which was like these comedies that you would just find when you went to go rent a film.
With a very Before Sunrise, Linklater kind of.
Yeah, it feels like something that like, it feels like a plot of a movie that Reese Witherspoon would have done before she got super famous.
Yeah, it would have been in the hands of like an American studio. They would have handed it to some journeyman director, and who would have just hacked out something very mediocre.
So I did want to talk about, I think it's both one of our favorite scenes, which is when Dom is going to go meet up with his ex-girlfriend Gia, and then his best friend Eric.
Well, because he tells us through a flashback. It's another one of those cleverly constructed flashbacks of how he was at the movies. He was waiting for Gia. He pre-orders all her food because she's so specific about the way she wants everything. And then he like FaceTimes her, and she acts surprised and says she's on her way. And he accidentally screenshots and he realizes he can see a penis in the background
Yeah.
and that it belongs to his friend. And I do love how they revealed, how would he know what his friend's penis looked like? And then it cuts to him and the actor that plays Eric as they're adults, but they're wearing like their clothes from like middle or primary school.
Yeah.
And they're like pissing in the trough and just going like, la, 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 la.
They're singing along to like a rap song.
Oh yeah, that's what.
And like they look, and he looks over casually at his friend's
and you
penis.
see like flecks of piss from the bottom of the screen because it's clear like they're peeing in like a trough or something like you find in a primary school. And so like that was a very clever sequence. And then he's agreed to meet with Gia and Eric because they want to clear the air.
Yes. And at first he was kind of like asking Yas, like, maybe you should come with me. They convince themselves that they shouldn't until Yas like ends up like crashing the brunch or lunch that they're having. Which it's the guy that plays Eric
Benjamin Sarpong-Brony.
Oh, he's so good because it's just like he's playing this like harmless himbo who you're just kind of like why would you do this?
He is a piece of shit to like do that, but the way he plays Eric, it's hard to hate him because he is just the dumbest idiot.
Like they're eating at a place that apparently will keep serving you food depending on the color of the coast.
I've been there. It's for them. It's like a Portuguese restaurant, and I've heard it done with Brazilian food, where you have like a coaster. It's red on one side, green on the other. Yeah. And when you want them to stop coming to the table, you put up the red. When you want more food, you put up the green.
Yeah.
And so he has the green one, and he's just everything that comes by, he's taken.
He's like, don't flip it over. And if you're not gonna eat it, let me eat it.
Yeah. And so he keeps offering them like, hey, you want some? And they keep no. But that doesn't deter him, and he just keeps eating and eating and eating throughout the scene.
Yeah.
And then Yaz kind of sticks up for Dom in that scene. Like that's the point of the scene, is that they're bonding in this moment because she sticks up for him, and later he's going to reciprocate.
Yeah.
But it's Eric's reaction to the things they're saying. It's as if he doesn't understand the context of the conversation. Yeah. And it's just moment by moment, like he catches references to things and likes that reference.
Well, I love that he like first he sees Yas, he's like, hey, you're moving up in the world, meaning like he's got to step up from his ex, but he's dating the ex, so the ex is like, hey, Eric, no, and he's like, what? He's like, oh no, yeah, whatever, and he's cheering them on, like telling them that they've been like how the way they met was amazing, even though like it's a fake setup, only for it to become almost reality towards the end. And he's like being Dom's best cheerleader during the conversation.
But he's the guy that ruined Dom's like 6-year relationship.
It's like very confusing because even Dom is kind of like, you need to stop cheering me on. I'm supposed to be here to make you feel bad. And like Yas just goes into like Gia, like is just sort of like, you broke up with this guy. I don't understand why. For this dude, and Eric with his little
is oblivious. He doesn't know they're talking about him.
He's like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And he even tells like, Yas is right. Like you did do that.
Then I like the scene where it's Yaz has left her Tribe Called Quest record in her ex-boyfriend's apartment. He's out of the country and she wants it back. So she devises this plan where they're going to go by his auntie's house.
At his mom's.
Yeah, mom and auntie's. And they'll find the spare key they keep to his apartment and steal it. But of course, that does not go how we think. And what I liked about that is we get a portrayal of a Black family living in an urban space that aren't some sort of like poster children for like people living in squalor and poverty. They're living comfortably, and they're doing something that they want to do, which is they're having this big cookout in the backyard, and it's like a big family event, and they seem very happy. And that it feels like there's a dynamic between these characters that Dom has stepped into.
Yes.
And it's a feeling that I've had many times in my life where I would have, a friend from college take me to some family event they're doing, or when we would go visit Puerto Rico and I would be around.
Totally fit in.
And you're just like, I don't know the dynamic here, and I don't know where I fit inside that dynamic. So I'm just going to sit here and try to be as quiet as possible. Dom is a little braver than I, because he does try to strike up conversation. But he sits in a chair, and then immediately some old uncle is like, you're in my chair. and he has to get out and be very apologetic. And then he gets fucked around with by one of the uncles in the scene that kind of caps off that sequence, but feels very much like the nightmare of something you would not want to happen to you in that situation. But you're like, so you can't trust anyone in this household?
I love that he's like talking to the uncle, they're hitting off, like they're starting to sound really like chummy with each other. And like he's like naming all these type of music that he likes, and he's like, oh, if you love all that music, let's play off some music from your phone. And he's like, no, don't do that. And it's all sad love songs because he's recently been broken up with,
or just like weird pop music that it does
like,
not
just shuffle it, and it just continues to be like white women droning out like this sad like wailing onto the microphone. And then like the guy gets back at him later on just being like, because he calls him old school, and he's like, old, and he leads him off the wrong path. It's very cartoonish in some ways, but it was still something that was enjoyable to watch.
Did you have any criticisms of this movie that you love so much?
I think it's a difference of culture because of the pacing. Like we talked about it being very British, so there's sometimes things feel like it lingers a little bit too long, but I feel like part of British culture is like making you feel awkward.
Well, it's very talky,
yes,
but it's also very fast paced. So they don't linger on a scene for too long. The conversation may continue, but they're going to throw you to a new location. We might go inside the flashback of the story that's being told. So visually, it's constantly trying to engage you by showing you things that are very like well filmed. We were talking about the color.
Like it doesn't end up you going like, let me see what's on my phone while they're talking.
Yeah, it's never a movie that you could say is visually bland. It's a very visually vibrant film. There's and it's bookended in an interesting way with art shows from the same artist friend who starts out, he's just taken a bunch of photographs of mouths and then blown them up and framed them, and at the end of the movie it's people's butt cheeks that he's taken photos of and framed them. And I like the way they kind of play with that. It as I was saying before, it feels like there's a lot of movies you often get about Black people in America, let's say, where lives are not portrayed as like good lives. I always think of like Precious. Or on the flip side of that, a Medea movie, which is very like, there's a lot of anger behind those movies. We're talking about angry cinema. Every Tyler Perry movie, I think, could be lumped into an angry cinema category. This movie feels as if it's acknowledging the reality of Black life in that there's all kinds of classes represented, all kinds of backgrounds represented. You can tell that Jules, her ex, his family feels very like London working class. While the kind of people that Dom and Yaz hang out with feel this more kind of hipstery millennial art scene kind of thing. And so it gives you this spectrum of people. No, it doesn't feel as if, oh, Black people is this, one cultural monolith. It just feels, oh, Black people, like anyone else, are a myriad and variety of different things in the societies that they live in. And I really liked that aspect of it. It felt a lot like Barry Jenkins movies try to be, where it's especially something like Moonlight, where, you have drug dealers and things like that, but that's not all that exists in the Black sphere of culture, right? There's professionals, there's all kinds of people. Would you recommend Rye Lane? And would you recommend it more than you would Sanctuary?
Ooh, probably, yeah.
I think this is a far more palatable film for most audiences. It's because this isn't extreme in any way.
Yeah, you're not going to be out there questioning if somebody got sexually assaulted or not, depending on the rules of a game. And along with that, it's a little bit more of a sweet film. So if you're like looking for something that is a little bit more uplifting and positive, this might be the thing for you.
Well, I saw someone say it was Wes Andersonian, and I'm like, his
that
films
just-
never feel contemporary, so that's hard to
Well,
say.
I think it's because of the pop of color, but I don't think it is because it doesn't feel as if it's so careful. It is just acknowledging that we're talking about Black culture that goes with bright colors and their love of those colors, and it should be accepted and a part of their influences versus like with Wes Anderson, that is just
Very
the aesthetic.
pastel.
Yes.
Yeah, and I feel like in this movie, the aesthetic played a role in the narrative. While in a Wes Anderson movie, I mean, I guess the aesthetic plays a role, but the aesthetic always feels so pronounced and separate from the story.
The aesthetics is never like you would say to yourself, that is something they personally chose to wear. It feels more like a uniform versus this feels like their personal style.
They embody the characters. Because I feel like the actor who played Dom, I believed he was Dom.
Yeah.
Like he did a very convincing job of being this reticent, put upon, kind of pathetic character who comes into his own over the course of the movie. And then I think with Yaz, it was kind of, she was this very bold, brash character who has vulnerabilities revealed as the movie goes on.
Yeah.
And it's about him learning to accept her vulnerabilities. And it's about her kind of pumping him up to demand more from life and not be shit down on so much.
Yeah.
I would say it's not a movie that just when it comes to style and tone, it's not my kind of movie, but it's still a movie that I acknowledge very well made. And I enjoyed watching it. Would I ever watch it again? Probably not, just because that's not my thing, right? But I would say if you are into romantic comedies and you've been disappointed by the few that you've gotten, I guess, in the last few years,
and the lack of representation into them.
Yeah, and the fact that there really aren't a lot of Black romantic comedies. I mean, I can't even name one. This is a wonderful new addition, I think, to that canon. Well, that was the PopCult Podcast for this week, and we hope you enjoyed this episode. Make sure to check the show notes for links to reviews and other relevant things, including to our website, popcult.blog. If you go visit popcult.blog right now, you're going to find that we're in the middle of doing a series on the Mission Impossible films, as well as a review series of Jack Kirby's Fourth World comics at DC from back in the 70s. Coming up later in the month, we'll be doing a couple weeks on what I've titled Angry Cinema, which are movies made by directors who are very angry about a specific thing and have made a movie about it. If you enjoy our podcast, we would encourage you to subscribe wherever it is you listen to them so that you'll be notified when new episodes are up. We also would like to suggest that you think about supporting us on Patreon. We have lots of different reward levels there. Speaking of Patreon, I want to thank our patrons, Morphine, who donates at the sneak preview level, and Becca and Matt, who both donate at the writer's room level. If you donate at that level or higher, you get to pick one movie every month for me to watch and review. You can include your own thoughts on that movie alongside my review as well. Well, until next time, keep listening.